Welcome to Bite Size, a series where we talk to traffic and mobility experts, discuss innovation, and highlight business leaders within transport and city planning. Hello, my name is Emily Bobbas, and welcome back to another episode of the Bite Size podcast. Today's topic is all centering around the innovations that have happened across roads, road tolls, and road infrastructure. In the last 5 years, so much has happened in the transport space, or so much has happened in the technology space that can now finally be applied to ITS, or Intelligent Transport Systems. So my guest today, super interesting conversation. I'm talking to Jeff Sharp. So Jeff is the General Manager of Technology Partnerships and Innovation at Transurban. So he's had 20 years experience. He's worked in Singapore, Adelaide and Melbourne. And he also has a really strong reputation for innovation and development within a range of sectors, which you'll hear about in the introduction, but also in Intelligent Transport Systems, or ITS. This topic is quite akin to the frog in boiling water analogy. You know, everyone knows it by now. You put a frog in boiling water, it jumps out. Put a frog in cold water, slowly boil it. It gets used to the incremental changes. And I think as people, we've done that with our road infrastructure. Road tolls are a really good example of this and how we've removed a lot of the friction using digitization. We used to give actual people money at a booth, or you'd throw your coins in a bucket as you drove through. Then we transitioned to e-tags that were so bulky in the middle of summer they would slide off your windshield and you have to physically hold them up as you went through the sensors, to what we have now, which is license plate recognition apps that allow you to pay for your use of motorways without the need of a tag at all, or the tags that are there are these tiny little things at the top of your windscreen. So Jeff, aside from talking through how we can apply new technologies such as IoT, digital twins or 5G to something like ITS, we also talk about how can you maintain and foster a culture of innovation, particularly in larger organizations that are seen as a little bit more cumbersome, and have them internally perceive themselves as just as agile as some of the smaller businesses. Not only that, but we also discussed the idea of what are our transport systems going to look like in 100 years' time based on all this technology. And if we've had so much change in the last 5 years, what does the next 100 hold? Jeff, thank you so much for coming onto the podcast to talk with me today.
Absolute pleasure, Emily.
I'm really interested to hear more about your personal career journey and your eventual involvement with Transurban, particularly with transport, because it's not something that I feel like a lot of people grow up being like, I will do parking or I will do roads. It just seems a little bit kind of more niche.
Yeah, it's, I guess careers are a journey and you don't really plan where you'll end up, although I've got to admit, I started out I did a science and engineering degree, so I did civil engineering, and I ended up doing highway design way back when in my final year at Monash Uni. So I sort of feel like a little bit like coming full circle.
Yeah.
But I had spent a long time away from transport, I've got to admit too. So long story short, I worked, I'll give you the I guess, high-level career overview.
Yeah, sure.
After uni, it was sort of the recession we had to have in Australia, the Keating recession. So I jumped on a plane and went to Singapore and built some factories over there, which was a really fun job. Yeah. But then when I wanted to come back to Australia, I joined a company that I'd done work experience for called Leighton's. They're now CPB. And they were building the original Optus network.
Oh, cool.
And that sort of got me into the telco space, sort of moved me away from civil engineering. So it was building a fibre from Adelaide to Perth. From there, they bought a company called Vision Stream from Telstra, and I eventually jumped across to them. They were building the cable TV networks, or the Foxtel network that's now being used for NBN. My career there got me across, I guess, telco, but then also ICT networks, so working in mines, smart transport, so what's termed ITS or Intelligent Transport Systems for roads, smart hospital networks, all sorts of things. So that gave me a really good grounding across a lot of sectors and understanding how technology was able to be used in those sectors. Yeah, I then took a bit of a left field trip and I did my own startup as well. So, which was sort of like my MBA. So I learnt a lot. The startup's still going. It's now run by an organisation based in New Zealand.
Awesome.
So a really good way to learn is my advice with startups. They don't have to be successful for you to get benefits. This one, maybe one day I'll be successful, but so far it's just going along a slow burn. I then joined to fund the startup. I then just got back into the normal workforce, I guess, and joined a company called Downer EDI in a position looking at innovation and technology. And they're really diverse, and I really enjoyed my time there. And they did a lot in roads. They own Spotless, so a lot in facilities management, mining again. So I got to do things across a whole range of areas, and we did some really smart stuff with a lot of partners in that organisation too. After 3.5 years there, someone at Transurban rang me up literally, would I be interested in a similar role with them? And I thought, wow, I really like the idea of a Melbourne-based organisation, which meant a little bit less commute, and also the ability to focus a little bit just on the transport sector, because in Downer I was, one day looking at hospitals, the next day mining, the next day schools or roads or, trains and trams. They operate Yarra trams, so it was really diverse. So just focusing my innovation juices, I guess, on roads is sort of a good thing in a lot of ways.
Amazing. It's really cool as well, I think, to have that as someone who also has a bit of startup experience. I was nodding away when you were like, you learn a lot. I'm like, oh my God, yes, you definitely learn a lot.
And I think that, out of any experience, if you can learn, that's the best thing. Yeah, that's the best asset you can get from any experience, ultimately.
Yes, definitely. So I don't know if your expertise is particularly in this, but road tolls are something we don't necessarily think about as consciously anymore because of the whole digitization of the process. So I'm just old enough to remember when they were still operating the coin in the bucket booths at the end of the Harbour Bridge, and the first e-tolls, which were so clunky that in the middle of summer they'd fall off the windscreen. My mum would get 10-year-old me to hold it up as we were going through the barriers. And I was kind of curious about what's next in that whole process and how new technology is improving and disrupting road tolls specifically.
Yeah, so it's a really interesting space, the future of road tolling. And we're seeing things like the Victorian government proposing road user charging for electric vehicles, which is not that dissimilar from a toll when you think about it. Yeah. In America, we've got some roads there, and we actually do variable tolling. So it's instead of a toll road as we have it here, where all the traffic goes on that road, and if you don't want to take the toll, you've got to take a totally different route. There we have a toll road that's parallel to the free road, and as the free road gets congested, you can then use our road, but the toll's variable, and it will increase or decrease with congestion on the free road. So those sort of things could be interesting down the track, in Australia too, who knows. Yeah. In terms of the future of tolling, though, I think, eventually we'll move beyond tags, no doubt. Yeah. Those have been around 20 years, and Transurban really was an innovator, innovations in Transurban's DNA. I think CityLink in Melbourne was one of the world's first what we term free-flowing toll roads, so not having those cash booths that you were talking about. But we don't know, I guess, where it will head. We're certainly using video footage to capture number plates. When someone doesn't have a tag in their car, so we can use that as a tolling methodology. We've also got a product called Linked Go, where we do essentially GPS tolling. So for people who don't want a toll account, they can download that app, and at the end of their trip, when they've safely stopped, it will say, look, we think you've driven on our toll road. Would you like to pay your toll now, yes or no? If they click yes, then it takes them through to pay that toll. So there's definitely GPS options. There's definitely video analytics options. We're just not sure which way the industry will in the end head.
I mean, it's all really cool having all of these. It's a little bit of the Wild West at the moment, I think, with everyone's trying to apply all these technologies to transport and see how they can kind of all fit in.
Yeah, and we're really part of a ecosystem. So no one drives on our roads solely. They're driving on our roads, feeding in from a larger road network, and they might also be at the end of that network, that drive, they might be going into another mode of transport. So whether it's they're flying somewhere or whether they're driving to a train station, it can be part of a bigger journey. So we're very conscious that it's not just a trip on our road. No one drives on our road just for the sake of it. They're trying to get somewhere and for a purpose.
Speaking of driving, autonomous and self-driving vehicles is obviously a big topic inside and outside of transport.
Yeah.
And I think there's an assumption that we should expect autonomous vehicles to conform to the roads in the current state. But of course, the roads that we have now were designed for different conditions and human drivers. What about like the other way around? So how are we future-proofing our road infrastructure to accommodate for the vehicles instead of what it is kind of more currently, where you just kind of shove a car on a road and hope that it can navigate its way from A to B?
Yeah, it's a fantastic question, Emily, because it's something we grapple with a lot. What do we need to do to enable what we term connected and autonomous vehicles? So we're seeing vehicles will be coming with a lot more communication or ability to communicate both with each other, but also with the infrastructure that they're driving on. So that's the bit that's really of interest to us. And if we can provide better data to vehicles, particularly autonomous vehicles in the future, that means those vehicles will be able to be safer on our roads, but also it might help the uptake of those, that autonomous mode. So maybe there'll be a stage when the roads that actually have really good communications and can talk to the cars and say, hey, there's this incident ahead and, the road's wet, maybe things like that. Those vehicles might be able to go into autonomous mode earlier than vehicles, non-connected roads, I guess.
Yeah, sure. So speaking of all the data and the technology around autonomous vehicles, but also just road infrastructure, you hear a lot about IoT or Internet of Things, digital twins, 5G. How is new technology like this being utilized on the user experience side? So travel time, reducing friction points, user experience, or just safety?
Yeah, so we're definitely trying to. Well, safety is probably the biggest focus, I guess. And we actually pride ourselves on having the safest roads in the country, and we do comparisons with like roads to understand that. But even understanding where there's incidents, so when there is, someone's broken down, maybe they've run out of petrol, or maybe it's a crash or something like that, we actually use video analytics and trying to use different data sources, whether it's data from vehicles or data from the roadside, to pick up those incidents quicker so that we can get out and help people as quickly as possible. So there's a whole range of opportunities we sort of see out there. We've been working with your other business, Emily, Compass IoT, looking at near-miss accident data. So that's data from vehicles that have SIM cards in them. And, we're able to see how heavily a vehicle's braked or steered. So we're looking at the G-forces. That to us is fantastic because we can then start to understand where there might have been nearly an accident and is there something we can change on the road to make it safer and avoid those, rather than what we traditionally do, which is wait till we see some accidents and then act.
Yeah, it's actually really interesting. I was reading it was a report from WA Main Roads, and it was written in 2015, and they were talking about applications of data and technology to either congestion or road safety. And the thesis or the end that they kind of came up with was, these tech would be really, really fantastic, but we basically have to wait because they haven't reached the capabilities in order to apply them to transport, and we should wait for 5G or connected vehicles to become more widespread. So it's kind of a little bit nuts watching in 5 years ago. A lot of the stuff we're doing now just wasn't physically possible because the technology either didn't exist or you couldn't apply it to this context.
No, that's right. And I often say to people, if you want to see what the future will look like, just open your eyes, because there is little snippets of the future everywhere, and these new technologies that just come so quickly, and you've just got to keep your eye out and see what's coming, and then how can you apply that new technology or that new data source to something, to a core business problem, and that's something I always find really exciting.
So when it comes to innovation across roads and road safety, in your opinion, how important are partnerships in both realising results and shared goals? So whether those partnerships be between two private businesses or public and private, or two public?
To me, partnerships is probably a core innovation process. So no one innovates in a bubble, so at the very least, to innovate, you need to be networking and talking to people and understanding what's happening both in your industry but also other industries, because very often technology is the same across different industries. Leveraging capabilities of other organisations. So no organisation has all the answers, and I always find it really interesting when we can partner with an organisation that's quite different, because then we tend to get solutions that are quite unique. So that to me is a real opportunity. So I'm always, when I'm looking to partner with organisations, I'm always looking for different skill sets, different viewpoints, and the differences, rather than looking for partners that do exactly what we do. That would be a harder space to innovate from.
So your role is all about leading innovation, developing strategic tech partnerships, and delivering innovation initiatives to support Transurban's growth, which I can imagine in such a large international organisation can be quite challenging. How do you maintain a culture of innovation, particularly in larger organisations? Because I think a lot of businesses kind of find that quite a challenge to tackle and perceive themselves as more cumbersome than, say, a smaller business who has the ability to be more agile very quickly.
Yeah, I think you've got to recognise that no one person can do all the innovation for an organisation. So, my role in Transurban shouldn't be coming up with all the ideas. That would be really crazy. We've got 2,000 staff who are all just as smart, if not smarter than me, and they'll have much better ideas. So a lot of what I try to do is create an environment where they can put forward ideas and some structure to help them develop ideas. And I think that's a really core part of my role, to enable innovation through the organisation, encourage it, but then also help coach and mentor people on, how do they take that spark of an idea and develop it through a pilot and then actually get it implemented. And, lots of people like to say, oh, why don't we do this? But actually going and getting it done is a lot of work.
Yeah.
So it's often the idea is the easy part. It's actually getting that implementation in there. The other part of my role is also finding business problems. So in any organisation, people will find workarounds when they encounter a blocker somewhere in the organisation. So that workaround just becomes normal practice. Sometimes, a fresh pair of eyes can be really useful to sort of say, well, why are you doing that? Why? And then you find out you're doing something to get around a blockage or a problem, and sometimes there's technology that can come in to avoid that.
Yeah, definitely. The last question I have, it's always a more, in a perfect world, a little bit more aspirational. So in 100 years, what do you think our roads will look like? And it's a two-prong, I should have warned you. And how can we prepare for that future? So what do you think they'll look like, and how do you think we can kind of manifest it?
Wow, 100 years is a long time.
Yeah,
and it's good because fortunately no one will be able to hold me accountable.
No, exactly.
Because I won't be here. Firstly, it'll be interesting to see, will we have roads?
True.
Who knows? So, we certainly have our roads. I sort of, when I'm looking at the future, start to look backwards and say, well, what did our roads look like 100 years ago? And surfaces would be very different. The technology in the road, we were just having signalized intersections, I guess, 100 years ago. So, that's huge changes. I think we'll definitely... the answer is we will have roads. There won't be no roads, even if we're all in our Jetsons, flying pods.
Yeah.
People will still want to be on roads as well. So even if it's just for driving their 2021, vehicle that they've still got. So there's always those enthusiasts who will want the roads anyway. I think we'll see roads. That are very connected. So, they'll certainly be communicating back to the vehicles and vice versa. We'll see large changes in materials. And that's an area I'm really interested in because, we're starting to see some really interesting materials come through and some really interesting products that can really improve roads. Then I think ultimately, the whole charging model for roads will be a different source. So, things like fuel taxes to charge for road usage just doesn't make a lot of sense. So I think those sort of things will definitely change, probably more the 20-year out. 100 years is really, really tough.
Yeah, a little bit of a tricky question there. I liked the image of a vintage 2021 car, and then you've got those kind of people versus maybe people who are in their pods like the Jetsons from that cartoon. So,
well, there's people now driving, cars that are 100 years old. So I can't see that changing.
Exactly. It'll just be vintage. I can't remember what the time frame is for something to be technically considered vintage, but it'll be like how record players are now considered retro. It's just like if you have a 2021 like Ford Focus or something, it's like the best thing ever.
That's right. And you think about autonomous cars. There's going to be people who will want to drive their car still, even when almost all the cars on the road are autonomous. We'll always have manually driven vehicles. So it's something we'll still have to cater for. So there'll be no getting rid of traffic lights and things like that because we still need to cater for that last percentage of people that are in there driving their car themselves. I guess at least until we can just prove that autonomous cars can't have accidents. That might be an impetus to say, well, sorry, you're only allowed to drive your car in certain confined areas because we just don't want to have those accidents.
Yeah, what you said reminded me, I think it's from the movie iRobot where Will Smith takes his car off like autopilot mode and kind of drives it up a wall in a tunnel or something, which was something completely just wild in the future. But it'll be interesting to see what happens, I think.
Absolutely.
Well, Jeff, thank you so much for taking time out to chat with me today about all the cool things involving toll roads and the future of vehicles and just, I think, infrastructure.
My absolute pleasure. I really enjoyed the discussion.
If you'd like to know more about Jeff or Transurban, you can visit their website, which is www.transurban.com. Alternatively, if you'd like to know more information about Bitesize or the company that produces this podcast, Compass IoT, you can visit our website, which is compassiot.com.au. Until next time.